Hello, Swivelheads. This is Greg Allison on Green Gregs. I got a special guest today for the topic of survival. With all the things we're going to have to face coming as a special guest is Jonathan Hollerman. Now, Jonathan Hollerman is the Deputy Director of the EMP Task Force in National and Homeland Security. He's wrote the book Survival Theory 2. Also, that's one of his latest. He's got Survival Theory 1, and he's got a report he's released called Grid Down Death of a Nation. And he's also got a company of his own called Grid Down Consulting. Now, if you don't think you should take prepping seriously, let me explain this. His clients are mostly billionaires, and they've got him sucked up almost full time now just doing that because they do take prepping seriously. And there's a lot of them that are out there doing it. So this is one reason you need to consider it. But his specialty with the military, he was one of the top trainers, the special forces and such for the military in the area of survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. It's called survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Now we can talk about that. We're going to talk about mutually assured assurance groups, MAC groups. So we're going to cover a broad range of stuff here. We know we got threats today. We know we've heard rumors of Jihad. Apparently today's episode was a nothing burger. No surprise to me because I think really that kicks in when we actually go to war with Iran or something like that, or when the flames of passion get kicked higher. But we're concerned that your most biggest threat is probably going to be not even the warlord or the gang member. It's going to be maybe your neighbor, somebody you know, when you're prepping and they know you're prepping. So we need to cover some ground on this and talk about what to do. This is a solutions-oriented video today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jonathan Hollerman. Jonathan, what do you think is the biggest threat that the preppers are going to be facing in the days, weeks, and months ahead?
Sure. So there's many different threats. We have terrorism. Obviously, we have the threat of financial collapse around the corner. We have the threat of a future pandemic, much worse than the last one we had, something with a high death or mortality rate. There's lots of different threats that face this country. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, that is also a high likely. I mean, worst case scenario is all out nuclear war. We can get into, super volcanoes and asteroid strikes and stuff like that. But those are just things that you can't plan for, right? They happen and you got to roll with the punches. But as far as the worst case scenario of things you should be preparing for is a nationwide grid down event, whether that's from a nuclear EMP, solar flare CME, cyber attack, or a physical attack against the grid. The reason that's a worst case scenario is because a nationwide grid down event has the ability to kill 90% of the American population within a single year. That's what the Congressional EMP Commission told Congress. And, to this date, Congress has not taken the warning seriously and hardened our electric grid. So again, most people are completely unaware that we could lose electricity in this country permanently, essentially. And no food, no water, no banking, no interstate trucking, no anything. When that type of scenario happens, the books that I've written and the information I've put out there shows that it will get way worse than most people think. Just looking at historical times this has happened, the Holodomor, the Chinese famine, the Bengal famine. You can look at the Holocaust and what happened in the ghettos, the Warsaw ghettos beforehand. Selko Begovic has some really good information on this during the Armenian situation here back in the late 90s. So yeah, that's the worst case scenario, is a nationwide grid down event. Now, if we're talking about just current events happening around the world, obviously terrorism is a very serious threat. I was just looking at some graphs here recently on special interest alien apprehensions at our southern border. There was over 6,000 from Pakistan, over 6,000 from Afghanistan, 30,000 from Turkey. There's a lot of Muslim countries where, there's like 20 or 30,000 of them on this one graph that we know of, that we captured just in the last 2 years. Now, that doesn't explain how many got away. We typically only capture a fraction that actually crossed the border. So, there could be 40, 50, 60,000. And I think there's up to, Greg, you might know for sure, but I think there's like 100,000 Chinese people that have came across the border here just in the last couple of years. So we're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of potential threats. Now, I'm not saying every single one of them is a terrorist, But even if a small fraction of them are terrorists, I mean, you're talking thousands of terror cells in this country. Now, today's day of rage.
It only takes a handful of small groups to take us down. That's what a lot of people don't realize or appreciate. I would suspect most of the people coming here are just coming here because it really stinks where they come from, and you can't blame them for that. But out of that, if you're one of these other countries who is somewhat less than enamored by the United States, who doesn't have the utmost love for this country, if you're one of these other nations that would like to see us knocked down, then you're going to send the people over here mixed in with that who could do us harm. And there's plenty of indications that that may be at play, especially when people come over the border and the first thing they do is they go to the range and go bang, bang, bang. And I use code words nugs on this channel, talk about some of that stuff. But we've seen that. That's already been on video. There's been people following these guys across the border and then follow them on once they get here. And it's amazing how fast they get a hold of smoke poles, nugs, and go bang, bang with them at the ranges. So this is something that ought to have people awake. When all this could go down. And again, I'm expecting it would be in the midst of a war. If we get into war with China, if we get into war with Iran, then these countries are going to activate those cells. And a cell might be as small as 2 or 3 people. 3 people working together, even one lone ranger could go in and do immense damage to and destroy a power substation. And FERC put out a report in 2014 that said if just 9 of these certain stations went down, it could bring our whole grid down. And what a lot of people don't realize, and I've covered this in my videos, is that these large transformers are almost irreplaceable. It takes 18 months to just get them on your loading dock if you got the means to order it. But we probably won't have the means when the bank accounts are shattered, the internet is down, there's nobody to do the work, and then by the time you get there, a large proportion of our population is deceased because of societal collapse, as you described, at 9 out of 10. I have told Dr. Pry and others that I think that number is actually optimistic, because I don't think when they did that assessment, they realized just how ineffective even we are today on the farms at growing anything other than market-oriented product. Most of the farmers, I've went around and done videos just going through very rural farming communities, just observing. You could drive for miles and not see a single garden. And I've confirmed that by going to Google Earth on top of that. So, looking in the backyards, which, all this stuff's, open. Anybody can go to Google Earth and look at that stuff. And a lot of people that are gardening are just growing stuff that they got to go to the stores and get to grow it. So they're not used to growing the kind of things that you can do every year with no stores available. There'll be no stores.
That's a very common misconception that you bring up, is a lot of the prepper fiction and the preparedness community, they look at the cities and they're like, oh, these cities are going to fall apart. But I'm a country boy can't survive, right? I know how to hunt and fish and this and that. But you're absolutely right. I live very rurally, and I know basically everybody I know is rural, and most of them know a general principle of how to garden. But I don't know a single person that I've ever met in my lifetime that lives off of what they grow in the garden and don't go to the grocery store for a bulk of their food. They don't, very few people have root cellars or understand root cellaring and long-term preservation and know how much food they need to grow to get till the next growing season. So just because you throw a couple tomato plants in the ground and pepper plants each year doesn't mean that you have the ability to grow enough food to live off of and store it and understand all the principles behind it, right? So the idea that the country people can survive without electricity, I don't believe that narrative to be true. And you're right. If you look on Google Earth, very few people have gardens. And if you do have a massive garden, a 2 or 3 acre market garden or something that you maintain, or you put one in directly after the collapse, if you think your neighbors aren't going to figure that out real quick, you're very naive. So yeah, it's a complicated. I guess my point is it's not going to be as easy for country people. It's not like, oh, this type of scenario is going to be really bad for those city folks, and us out here in the country, we're going to be just fine. That's just not the case. The country people are going to be affected if 90, even if you are one of the 0.5 of 1% of the American people that actually have the ability to grow your own food, store it, understand all the principles, and actually do it well enough to make it through to the next harvest season, you and your immediate family, the other 99% of the country people around you are going to eventually probably take your stuff because you're outnumbered 100 to 1. So Yeah, it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. It's not a simple solution. The great threat in this scenario is the lack of food, but it's also people.
Yes, and that's why I advise people a lot. Plus, also, you could have a hailstorm wipe your crop out. You could have a late season frost, especially if we have a nuclear exchange and there is some aspect, be it light or whatever, of a nuclear winter, or asteroid hits, or volcano, or something causes crop failures in the summertime, as happened back in 1817 after the 1816 eruption of, I believe it was Tambora. So there's a lot of things like that that can wipe your crops out. Bugs. You might grow a garden 2 or 3 years and it goes really well, but
Yep.
the third year the bugs find it, or the deer find it. They don't necessarily find it, or your neighbors find it. So you got to remember these things. That's why I tell people they need to buy enough seed that they can replant, and maybe have them for the next year, maybe even enough to give their neighbors, so their neighbors will be growing their own when it gets down to it. And I tell people I've got a couple of websites you can go to and get heirloom seeds. The open air pollinated heirloom seeds is what you got to have, or you won't get the same plant back. So I'd have True Leaf Market and Eden Brothers. I'll put links to that below. And another thing I tell people is you need food you can store for a long time. It's best if you can store it outside of your house, because your house is probably gonna get run over. You talk evasion a lot, and so sometimes you gotta get out of the house when you're overwhelmed. You can't stand and fight if they outnumber you 100 to 1. So you need to have stuff that the neighbors don't know about, the sheriff can't find, and so yeah, we got to worry about the sheriff too, right? When they get hungry. So I've advised people to go to prepwithgregs.com. If you go to prepwithgregs.com, you can find 25-year storage food, and it comes in buckets that are sealable. Inside those buckets, you got nice little pouches like this, which are also sealed. You can put in a bug out bag. But the cool thing about this stuff, you can bury it, and you need to have some things buried where nobody can find it, but only you know where it's at. So when they clear your cupboards out, you're not going to starve to death. I'd bury some seeds too. But this is an important kind of asset to have, because it might get you through. It's got 2,000 calories a day, which tell me what that means in terms of prep regular. What does 2,000 calories a day mean with regards to prep and supplies, and what other suppliers offer? What you mentioned something about that yourself.
Yeah, the average long-term food plan has, like, if you're, I don't want to name any names, I don't want to get sued, but most of the long-term food packages you buy are going to have about 800 calories a day. They're going to say, oh, 3 servings a day. And it's so critical, if you are into preparedness and you're buying long-term food, do not buy based on serving sizes. Buy it based on calories. So go online and go to a basal metabolic calculator and find out, based on height, weight, sex, age, exactly how many calories your family needs. And that's a base rate. That means that if you laid in a bed all day, so you need to multiply that number you get by 1.5. And then buy your long-term food based on calories. And I know up to a couple of years ago, when I wrote Survival Theory 1, almost all these companies, they hid the calorie count in these food plans. They just talked about the servings and how many servings. And on average, a lot of these plans, like a serving size of rice was a quarter cup. My 6-year-old eats more than a quarter cup of rice, right, at dinner. So like you need to have a spreadsheet and understand exactly how many calories you have. And that's real important when you're going after long-term food. But on the seed side, I would add on top of that. So it's very important to have heirloom seeds and seeds that will propagate the same type of vegetable and everything the following year. But a lot of people poo-poo genetically modified seeds for that reason, because you can't keep growing them. But the thing is, the seeds are super cheap. In my opinion, yes, you need non-GMO seeds and you need heirloom seeds, but I would recommend also buying the genetically modified seeds that have the best. You were talking about pests, but also diseases. So there's a lot of really common diseases. Like I'm in South Central PA for many years, and I've had powdery mildew because a lot of the thunderstorms and the humidity absolutely wipe stuff out. You're not going to have the ability to go to your Tractor Supply and buy an herbicide or buy, something to take care of some disease that you have. So while I'm not pro Monsanto or anything like that, I'm just saying that I would look for also have seeds that are really good natural protection against different diseases that are common in your area. So that's something a lot of preppers don't talk about, but so don't skip the heirloom seeds, but I would have some of each.
Let's split the frog hairs here just a little bit. When we're talking GMO versus hybrid, that's two different things. The GMO can be a seed that give you the same crop back. Hybrid seeds are when you cross two different varieties in order to get a specific output, like a really large tomato. But when you plant the seeds from that, you get some little gnarly tomato the next year. So I would definitely avoid the hybrid seeds. The GMO seeds, most of them are GMO for the purpose of being able to use Roundup and nasty stuff like
Roundup. I misspoke. So
farmers use, and for the big crops. But for the vegetables, and I don't have as much issue with that. Like you said, if you're just trying to prevent mildew and stuff like that, that's probably a deal. Now, one thing I do personally is I'd have worm tea because I raise worms. And worm tea applied to plants will fight the moles, the mildews, and the rust and things like that. So, and you can make your own fertilizer. That's why I talk about worms. I got a worm farm in Region because I realized it was one of the best grid down businesses to be in, because I could take care of my stuff without having to go to the store. You can go to greengregs.com. I'm about to shut down worm sales for a couple of weeks, so I'm about to run out to Arizona again. All right, so who are you most concerned about when it goes down knocking on your door?
Yeah, so again, this is a kind of a byproduct of Hollywood movies on this topic, and mostly I would say preparedness fiction books. Just picturing The Walking Dead, right, or some prepper fiction book. In almost every case, the person storming the gates of your castle is some nameless, faceless, bad guy, on orders of the governor, or they're just hungry, starving people that are trying to kill you and take your stuff. I believe that that's definitely probably going to happen, and that's could be a reality. But I would say the majority of the people that you're going to face the first few months, at least, are probably going to be people that know you, second cousins, first cousins, co-workers. When you start talking about prepping around the water cooler at work and all the cool stuff that you're doing, that stuff travels. The first rule of preparedness is keep your mouth shut. Treat it like Fight Club. There's no reason for anybody needs to know what you're doing and where you're doing it. I think that's going to be the death of, I would say, a vast majority of preppers in this country that prep at home, is because there's just too many people that know what they're doing. And I forget what the rule is, the Kevin Bacon or whatever, 6 degrees of separation or whatever, but stories travel, things travel, especially when people are starving and hungry and desperate, and their young child's laying on the couch, and they're going to go, and there's no food left. They're going to go, the only place they're going to be racking their brain, where can I get food? And at some point, your place is going to come into their mind. And the idea that they're just going to, they may come and ask, and they may plead, they may be beg, they may be forceful, but at some point, if it's life or death for their child, they're going to get their group together, their family together. So my point is, it's not going to be nameless, faceless people knocking at your door likely the first couple months. It's going to be people and this like whole prepper fiction fantasy where you're just going to blow everybody's head off that is coming at you, that takes a whole new angle when it's co-workers and family members and extended family members that you don't have food to feed. Yeah, and your food stores will be gone in a hurry. That's another good reason to have stuff that you bury. Put it in cache. Yeah. So I'm out. I don't have anything. So that's one of the primary things with my clients is, and again, in the preparedness community, it's always, store the stuff in your basement at home, store the stuff in your basement at home, or at your retreat. Okay. If you have all your food, ammo, guns, every life-sustaining piece of equipment is in the four walls of your house, in my opinion, you're kind of doing it wrong, because at some point there's going to be a big enough group that comes that because if you do that, you're forced to defend your place like the Alamo. Okay. And even if you
not do well for the Alamo, did it?
No, I was just going to say it didn't work out for them, did it? and they had big stone walls.
And your house is Jim Bowie and Davy Crockett there, and even they
could. Yeah, right. You didn't have them fighting on your side either.
Well, Santa Anna's army was too big. I mean, hey, they were the best in the West, but they had Santa Anna's army coming after them, and it was just too much. I've been to the Alamo. It's a sad thing, but that's, the Alamo's built better than most of your homes, by the way. It was a small mission, really, but it did have the stone walls. It was a fortress, and it could not hold up, even with the best guys indoors, against what came at them. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. And the other thing is that if you don't have putting all your stuff in your house is putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yes.
I'm a safety engineer, among other things. I've done avionics safety, and we believe in redundancy, and having a single point failure, all your things in one basket, is a disaster. I've had so many people say, Greg, what's the point in prepping if a fire burns your house down? What's the point in prepping, if you get a flood? They talk about what happened in Maui and stuff like that. So you don't do that. You spread things around. You don't put it all in your basement, inside your four walls. And the other thing is, if you're being overwhelmed, the best thing to do is just leave, get out, let them go through your house. And once they went through everything, they'll leave. Then you can come back and go in your backyard or back down the trail where you buried something, dig up what you need, and you're a game on again. Why fight the battle and lose it when you could actually win the war in the long term just by surviving? So it's I don't advocate violence. I do advocate self-defense, but sometimes you just can't do enough when you got so much at you. And I think the Alamo is a perfect example. I'm glad you brought that up. That is a good one. I'll try to use that more in the future. So,
well, houses, rifle ballistics, if you get a firefight, rifle rounds are going to go through 2, 3, 4 walls in your house. Normal buildings are not meant for firefights, right? And then there's always fire. But yeah, I recommend my clients keep 90 to 95% of their long-term food, all their spare ammo, and a lot of their extra equipment in an underground storage facility away from their house. That way, if it is a small group and you feel that you can, with overwhelming firepower and thermal optics and night vision, and if you have firing positions, you have the ability to overwhelm an enemy in self-defense, like you said, then to do so. But there may be a large enough group where, and again, this goes back to the kind of the preparedness fiction, which is very popular, is that it always seems to work out, right? Bullets go 2 directions. And if you've got a team of guys or a team of guys and gals that are fighting off the bad guys, there's a good chance that one of them is going to get shot or probably killed. And the toll on your psyche, your entire group psyche, when loved ones or group members die, is going to be a huge hit. Again, I have the kind of the firm conviction: live to fight another day. Fight battles on your terms, not on their terms.
Bingo.
And
exactly.
There's a simple product. It's called burglar bomb that you can buy for your retreat location. And what it is, it's called burglar bomb. So it looks like a fire extinguisher up in your ceiling, but there's 4 canisters. It's motion activated, and you wire it into your house. And basically the last one out the back door flips the switch. Okay. And as these groups come into your house, it will basically fill up your house with pepper gas, not a spray, but a gas. And maybe they do have the mass available that they can use, but it's going to make their life really miserable. And then it resets itself, so it'll go off 4 times. You can keep somebody out of your house for up to 15, 20 hours. That gives you and your group time to regroup, get the women and children to safety, and then take care of whatever business you need to take care of, or just let them take the 5% if it's a big enough group. You don't have to win. Let them, like you said, let them take the stuff, move on down the road. They'll think they cleaned you out. And then just one other aspect I do. So I talk about 95% of the stuff hidden outside the 4 walls of the main facility.
95%. So take a note, folks. 95%, not in your 4 walls.
Yep. And then, but the other 5% that is in the 4 walls, I always have a secret. You can see the hidden bookshelves, and I always hide that as well, because you want to make them feel like they found something hidden. So we'll keep a whole bunch anytime you got your number 10 cans, your 6-pound super pails. Anytime they're empty, keep all your empties in that room, and the stuff that you're currently using and going through, and use that as like a kitchen a cupboard, right? But have it hidden. Make them work to find it. If they work to find it, then they'll think they found your stash and they won't come back, right? Then you can move back into your house or your facility, and 95% of your goods are still there.
There you go. There you go. A great idea. So that is the evasion part. So what about resistance? You do talk, that does cover evasion and escape some. What about resistance?
Well, SEER in the military, we're typically working with air crew members and some special operations guys, but basically anybody that's going to be flying on a plane, possibly getting shot down in enemy territory. So it's the training we did was really catered towards, surviving in that type of scenario. So evasion scenario, yeah. So evasion and resistance. So resistance is anti-interrogation techniques that we train them in if they were captured. So, actually a lot of that's classified. So I can't get into the anti-interrogation techniques that we taught, but the evasion side of it, that is that's a really common thing that's talked in the preparedness community. They typically call it the gray man, right? Become the gray man, blend in. And there's a time and place for that, for sure. But don't stay in the city and hang your hat on becoming the gray man and sneaking around town looking for resources or trying to blend in the city. Or, I've heard people say, "Oh, put a garbage bag over your head," what I'm saying, over your shoulders, and just look like a bum. Well, I mean, when people are hungry and starving enough, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. They're going to take you're a target of opportunity regardless of what you're wearing.
Well,
in my personal opinion,
sooner or later,
you're
hungry enough, you're the meat. You're the long port.
That's possibility too.
They're going to be looking at you.
Right.
That's
my opinion.
So,
the whole idea of walk softly but carry a big stick mentality of I want to project strength. So if there is going to be the people that are running the ambushes are going to be hungry and starving themselves, they may wait for the guy that's a softer target, right? I think projecting strength in this environment is a better way to go than trying to be the gray man and try and blend in, because I don't think you're going to blend in with anything. I think so. Again, I don't want to say there's no time and place for that mentality, but for the most part, I want to project strength
to save our lives. But the strength aspect is good because they teach you that if you're the one walking across the parking lot and you're looking weak and frail, you're the guy that the thug is going to hit to grab what you got in your pockets or what you're carrying. But if you're out there and you're strong, they'll leave you alone. Because they're
making eye contact. Yep.
Yeah, you make a little eye contact with them. You don't stare at them, but
right.
They know, and they know you're looking pretty self-confident. So they go, that hombre might be a little bit more than I want to tangle with. Let me find an easier target, because they do. They go for the easy targets. They're chickens, but
exactly.
Even a predator does that. A predator is not going to take on an animal that's going to gore it and injure it, because then it can't hunt. And it'll go off and starve to death. So predators do that too, whether it be people or animals. So these are all things to bear in mind. Really good advice points here. A lot of people hadn't considered. So I appreciate that. But we got to deal with the eventually, first it's your neighbors, it's your cousins, your aunts, your uncles. And then it's going to be eventually it's going to be the warlords. Whoever survived enough, a lot of the gangs will be forming people up. And then there may be groups, there'll be groups here that'll be here to do harm, but they're not going to know how to survive beyond whatever they do. They'll be taking and grabbing what they can. But the biggest threat with them is they'll be attacking our infrastructure, unless they pull the kind of stuff Hamas did in the local communities there. But that's kind of a one-off thing. Once they've done the terror and the terror has been performed, what do they do then? They got to save their own ammo for their own preservation after they've done whatever dirty deeds they're going to do. I worry about our dams. I worry, especially the upstream ones that can cause cascading failures downstream if they fail. I did a video on that. I worry about our power grid. You worry about your power, your water. But if you lose the power, you lose all of it. You lose all of it. So they will do infrastructure damage. They will attack our infrastructure every way they can. They'll hack it. They will blow things up. They will shoot things up. They'll be here to take down our infrastructure. That's their number one targets. But they will also try to terrorize people and cause mayhem initially at first. But then they'll be trying to survive too. They'll be saving their ammo, and they may be forming with gangs and other organizations to go in cartels. They may link up with the drug cartels and try to terrorize communities. But that's one reason we need to have some mutual assurance groups now. So this is the next topic. So there's mutual assurance. There's two kinds of mutual assurance groups. There's the ones you don't know about. Those are the best ones. And then there's the ones that everybody knows about. So what do you think about that?
So the idea of you and your spouse and your two kids running off to the national forest or some cabin in the woods that you have, some hunting camp or something, and making a long-term go of it, that's really difficult. Like the people that cross the frontier barely had those skills, and most Americans that think they have those skills today don't. So I'm saying that's a better option than chilling in town for sure, right? But at some point you're going to want to, it's ideal to have a group of people, 24-hour security. There's a lot of manual lifting and things that have to happen in that kind of environment, as far as gardening and growing and digging root cellars and the other things we've talked about. So you do want to look at, it's ideal to have a group, but that has to be taken so slowly. So in Survival Theory 1, I actually talked about how to form mutual assurance groups, because a lot of people just rush into that. They understand that, maybe they're a computer programming guy and they don't have a lot of gardening skills. They don't have a lot of the life skills. They realize they need to attach people that have different skills than they do. And with any mutual assurance group, you got the guys that are ex-military, you've got people with medical skills. You want to have a range of people with different skill sets to kind of make it through this thing. However, that's a slow process. So I think a lot of times people will just jump into some prepping forum and they start chatting people up. They're using their own names and their own email addresses or whatever. They're meeting people too soon. That's a relationship I'm going to take very, very, very slowly. I may even, I recommend people use fake names. I know it's kind of silly and weird. Build a email address specifically for these type of forums or these type of discussions. But your mutual assurance group, you need to form it very slowly and very carefully. Most mutual assurance groups are made up of people they already know, right? Which is good and bad. So if we just talked about the first rule of prepping is keeping your mouth shut and not talking about it. Now we're talking about it, right? So anybody that you discuss this with becomes a future threat. So the problem is if you have this open policy where you're trying to build this group, right? And as somebody that has done over 500 survival retreat analysis and builds to this date, and nobody else has in this country or in the world, I don't think, has done near as many as I have. I've done large groups. I've done church groups. I went to one that was about 75 members strong, and I met I met the main guy with the main facility, and then I met with the entire church group. And the problem is everybody was interested. Everybody thought it was a cool topic, and they'd have their monthly get-togethers. The problem was 85% of them had never put their money where their mouth was and never put food there. And I told the guy, that's your problem, is you have people that are interested in discussing this with you. They'll be on board, but until they put their money where their mouth is and actually buy long-term food for their family and store it at that location, I don't want to say a threat, but they're a liability. Let's put it that way, right? So it's a complicated subject. And then the other thing is humans change in this environment. It's hard to tell before the scenario happens, because every person is going to react different. You have a family that comes in and their kids are at college, and the wife, justifiably so, is kind of losing her mind because her babies are probably dead somewhere. You have people that have maybe the father was killed on the way there, right? Now you have a mother and two children, and the psyche of the people that are going to be part of this group is going to evolve over time, because things are going to fall apart really bad, really fast. And keeping control in that scenario, that situation, is going to be very difficult, because it's going to be very difficult times. So psychology isn't the psychology of the people involved in the group is really difficult. Kinship is important. If you can build a group out of people that you have blood relations with, that's the best case scenario. The last thing I would mention on this is be careful of the whole cul-de-sac survival plan. I mean, this is something that is so common, like, we live in the suburbs and me and my neighbors are all chatting this thing up, and we're gonna form a 24-hour security, and we're gonna start gardening here. I've seen so many people go down this road talking with their neighbors, and at the end of the day, they're the leader of the group, right? They're the ones with the long-term food and the Berkey filters and the big garden behind their house, and all their neighbors talk about it like, yeah, let's do that. We'll fight off the marauding biker gangs, and we're all work together. In every situation, that family doesn't have near as many calories as they think they do. Worst case scenario, and worst is the fact that all those people on their cul-de-sac are going to be eating their food. It's like that bell doesn't ever go off in their head. That light bulb doesn't go off, is the fact that, yeah, you can have this great mutual assurance group, but if everyone isn't getting fed the same, that group is going to fall apart so fast. You have to face the fact that they're going to know that you're eating food and they're not, because they've never put the money up. They like talking about it, but they never put a year's, or maybe they got like a month's worth of food, right? And you have the 6 or 8. At some point, they're going to be eating your kids' food, right? And the moment you try and stop that from happening, they outnumber you, right? It's just it's a conversation. I don't think people really take it far enough to understand it fully.
That's why I buy a lot of seeds and a lot of hose. Let's sharecrop your lawn, and let's go in together and grow food in your lawn. But
well, I agree. I agree with that mentality, but you have to have enough calories and food to get to the harvest season. And that's the problem, is that if you run out of food before that food in the ground reaches maturity where you can start eating it, that's the threat. Right. So people do have the ability to form groups for that reason. And I agree with it. And I think it's a great idea. But if you don't have enough food to feed everybody in your group until that point where you're self-sufficient comes to fruition, you're never going to get there.
Also, you need to vet anybody you're getting involved in. My discoveries have been that you'll get people who will come in and they'll make a lot of promises and sound great and wonderful and being all enthusiastic, and then you'll discover they're a sociopath or a psychopath or something like that. I've actually had dealing with an individual like that, and it's alarming. So you've got to, and I know some other people that ran into that, or you'll get freeloaders. They'll just move in on you and won't do a darn thing. They just want you to take care of them. I mean, they won't even help you put a nail into something. They're just, you really need to vet groups, and maybe even have some work parties, get people together somewhere. But, first you got to explore them and talk to them, just like dating somebody. It's kind of like getting married. So,
yeah, 100%. I actually mentioned that in my book. You're quoting my book. I said you have to treat it like dating somebody for marriage. It's a long-term commitment. These people are going to be living in your house with you or living alongside with you. You need to, and I wouldn't have them meet at your retreat or your, I would go to many dinners before I even had them to my house. You know what I mean? I want to make sure. Yeah.
Have coffee with them somewhere, meet out a bunch and meet in other locations. Maybe have a good thing would be to have a mutual training ground somewhere else, or this might be a good reason to have a community garden. As you go there and you see who's really up to the snuff for working. I mean, community gardens are going to get wiped out eventually anyway, but if you want something as a training testing ground, it might be a good way to do it. But we're running out of time for these things. I really think that we're in deep kimchi, and some things are going to start going ugly and faster than not. That's what I'm worried about. We may have days, weeks, or a few months. If we're lucky, we might get a few years squeezed out of it. But I just saw in a report that says if everything works great and wonderful, the federal government has about 20 years until the the wheels come off and can't service our debt. And that's if everything works great and wonderful. But they also said that once the creditors figure out you're getting near that point, they're going to cut it off beforehand. They're not going to keep loaning money to somebody they know. The federal government's not going to pay it back. Look, we already got people aren't buying our bonds right now. We just had a big bond offering and there was no takers. So the United States, our government, our expenditures, it's all in trouble. And when that goes down, it's going to be a financial apocalypse in this country. So even if the Russians and the Chinese do nothing but blow kisses at us and and everything else grows hunky-dory, the financial system is going to be a wreck. And that's going to be sooner rather than later, too. You might get a few years out of it, but that's not going to be decades. You'll be lucky if you can squeeze 2 decades. I doubt it. 10 years is probably more probable, or sooner. I think that article was optimistic too. But we're faced on a lot of threats, and the thing to do is to get ready. I highly encourage everyone to check out Jonathan's books. I've got several interviews. Actually, this is, I believe, the 5th time I've had Jonathan on my channel here. Thank you for coming back. I think we've had him on here in the past by himself, probably about 3 times. We've had him with General Ken Krosniak a couple of times, and I probably should get Ken back on here to talk about the military situation in the world today. We've not had him on the channel in many months. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And moreover, the thing I really appreciate is you're one of the guys who's trying to be part of the solution space by getting involved in things like the EMP task force. You're trying to find solutions and fix things, because fixing things is a whole lot better than dealing with them after they're broken.
Amen.
A lot of us make this work. That's why I started the Freedom Restoration Foundation.org. We got groups on Facebook. I think we can push things in the world politics. I've been involved in that through my National Space Society activities I did when I was chairman of the policy committee. And I myself have had huge major impacts on space legislation. I know it can be done by small groups. Been there, done that. Even though the system might be racked against you, you'd be surprised how many wins you can get in some of these areas. I mean, just look lately, look what happened to Bud Light. So the people can have an effect. So we got to bear that in mind. And if everything's going to crash, it might mean it crashes with a lighter landing than a heavier landing. It might make it easier to survive in the end. So we got to push every way. They're pushing on us every way they can. The whole system breaking and falling apart. So I think it's up to us to do everything we can to make things work, or at least have a softer landing if it doesn't, if it breaks. The more work we do on our end, the easier it's going to be when it hits the fan. So, and you're part of the solution. I appreciate that. And I think we got to go here. But you got any final observations, final points? What do you think our viewers need to know the most?
So the most important thing is that is your mind, is educating yourself. I say this regularly, we're living in a post-truth world. You can't believe what your eyes and ears hear on the TV or internet anymore. It's almost impossible to tell what's true, what's false. It's just, we live in a weird world. So the same could be true for the preparedness community. I generally believe it's kind of a it's a regurgitation of the same concepts and ideas that have been around since the 70s and 80s. And I'm a huge fan of Mel Tappan from back in the day, right? I mean, he was one of the original guys I used to read back in the day. I mean, but the threats they faced back then are different than today. The grid down threat changes the dynamic so completely. If you're preparing for a financial collapse, okay, a serious, mega meltdown financial collapse, you're not prepared for a long-term grid collapse. So my company motto at Grid Down Consulting is prepare for the worst, hope for the best, let God do the rest. So we're not saying live your life in fear. I'm not telling you to go in and cash your kids' college fund, but you need to educate yourself on the threat. So the report that I wrote, so I was a member of the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, which is a 3-day wargaming event down at the LeMay Wargaming Institute. And afterwards, the leadership there in General Quas asked me to write a report on starvation and societal collapse and how it would affect the military. So I wrote a white paper for the LeMay Wargaming Institute and the EDTF. In that report over the last year and a half, I've just completely grown it. And I've added some other reports and graphs and pictures, and you can download that for free. So this is going to tell you what society is going to look like after the fact. This is the kind of the culmination of my life's work, and I want everybody to read this and have it for free. So like I said, it's 122 pages. You can download on my website, griddownconsulting.com, griddownconsulting.com. Under the research tab, you'll see Grid Down Report. You can go there and you can download it. If you want a paperback copy, you can get them on Amazon. This is what it looks like. Grid Down, Death of a Nation, the psychology and physiology of human desperation, starvation, living without rule of law, and a prolonged grid down event. So in here, this is 8.5 by 11, full color. There's lots of pictures and graphs and things like that in here, okay? So, but that doesn't really give you any solutions. So this book here, Survival Theory 2, which is my latest book, This has this report in the first third of it, minus the pictures and everything, but I provide solutions after the fact. So especially, he mentioned I work with super high net worth individuals, clients, and build survival retreats and analyze and make recommendations for survival retreats. But I realize that the average Joe watching this doesn't have that ability. And most of the YouTube prepper sphere is going to tell you just stay in town. That's your safe space, your home, prepare in suburbia. I believe if we have a long-term grid down collapse, your best chance of survival is getting out of town. And the problem is if you don't have a place to go, survival retreat, I put 5 or 6 different scenarios in that book, better, how to bug out if you're on a budget, right? Because that's the thing. That's the binary system that they throw at you on these YouTube channels, is as if, you either stay at home or you're going to wander around the open road and live off the. No, that's terrible. I agree that that's not an option. If you can't afford a survival retreat, there are other options. So anyways, you can find out more information, griddownconsulting.com. My latest book, Survival Theory 2, the report, the 122-page report on the psychology and physiology of starvation and what mankind's going to look like after this, with all the data and everything. You can get that for free. Share it with your friends, family. It'll wake a lot of people up. The last thing is a good portion of that report, probably 20% of it, is historical narrative, not historical discussions of previous famines, but historical first-person accounts of people who lived through these starvation events and how it affected them personally, how their community around them reacted, because that's the biggest misconception in the preparedness community. If there's no food and water, I don't care what kind of plans you're making, what kind of group you have. If the people aren't fed, that group's going to eat itself alive, and you're not going to be able to maintain control. You're not going to be able to lead it. You have to have food. So take a look at what happens with tight-knit communities hundreds of years ago, with people with a better moral compass than the people in our country today, and life skills that we only dream about. Look how bad it affected their communities, and take that information, look at today, and it's going to be 10 times, 1,000 times worse than those previous cases. So Greg, man, I really appreciate you having me on again. I'm happy to come on anytime, and I love these chats with you, and let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, maybe we can talk budget bug out or something next time around. Bugging out on a budget. Hang on for just 1 minute. So I want to thank everybody for watching. I'll try to get the links below so you can look at the show notes and the pin notes. And just remember, everybody, prep and pray, and hope we have a better day. Thank you for watching. Greg out. Let's see. Hang on.